know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
CJ, we're going through this amazing Stanley Cup postseason. The ratings are up in different places. The matchups have been great. And there was this one thought that came to my head while I was watching one of these games over the weekend, probably the Rangers game. What is your favorite Stanley Cup playoff moment of all time?
Whew. That's a tough question, man.
Oh, it is. But I think of these things all the time.
What are the parameters? Is it like a game when I was in the building working? Is it when I was a kid? Is it something with historical sort of undertones? Like where are we drawing the line here? What's the criteria to judge this?
Whatever you feel is the best way to answer that question. It could be something that you saw in your childhood in person that you think is just incredible. It could be something that you've researched and you've looked at and you think, you know what, like with all the emotions pouring into this has to be the greatest thing ever. This could be something you've seen in person while working. This could be something you might have even seen this year. It could literally be anything you want.
So what you're saying is there's no criteria.
Yes.
For sure, as a kid, the thing that got me most excited, that stuck with me the longest, was the Leafs playoff run in 1993. Probably this best singular moment that I experienced is they scored in overtime in Game 7 against Detroit, Nikolai Borishevsky, and I was just the right age where that was a big deal. And at that point in time, basically, I'd never seen the Leafs win a playoff series, and I was a kid, so that had my whole neighborhood excited. But that doesn't historically maybe doesn't resonate. But that's something that like sticks in my mind from when I was really young. In my career, probably my favorite cups that I've been around were the Crosby Cups and the Ovechkin Cup. Like for different reasons. Obviously, Crosby 2009, it was an awesome Game 7, 2-1 win at Joe Louis Arena. Crosby unfortunately got a knee injury in that game and was sort of limited. But to see him win that cup after the year before falling short. And then when he won again in 2016, because the Penguins had gone through so much in that 7 years. And then, really that Washington run was something special just because how great that team was, how great Ovechkin's been. And it took them so long to get there. And so those are the ones kind of that stand out in my mind. Maybe not what you're thinking, because it's not exactly moments, but sort of moments seeing those guys with the Stanley Cup, just sort of feels right. I think it's the way we'll feel if we see Nathan McKinnon raise it at some point, or Connor McDavid. You just feel like the best player should get there. And in my career, those are the ones that kind of have been implanted, strongest in my mind.
Those are moments, and those absolutely count. Like, it doesn't matter to me from your perspective if you pull out a memory that like a handful of people watching this podcast or listening to this podcast were not even alive for, which I guess I also fall into that because I wasn't alive in 93, but you get what I mean. Like, that's fine. Your moments and your memories are yours.
Right. Well, and I think that there's something about experiencing a sport when you're a kid that like puts it in your blood forever. And so that's kind of that playoff run. Probably, like, I was already a hockey nut as a young kid, but like that's like it's so strongly imprinted on my brain that, even I got to university, which was many years after 1993, and my friends and I sometimes would watch that old tape that's called The Passion Returns that they made of it. It's corny as all hell, but like, like we'd put that on after a few beers or something every once in a while. Like, it just because you associate those childhood memories as such positive thoughts. And so I think most kids, it can be random stuff. Like I have a nephew who's a big Canadians fan and he lives in Ontario, but it was the Lars Eller 4-goal game, which wasn't, of course, in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but just seeing Lars Eller score 4 goals for some reason made him a huge Habs fan. And so like, that's what I'm sort of talking about. It's almost when you're young, you're not making a rational decision. You're not thinking, I live here, so I should cheer for this team or whatever. Sometimes it's something as random as one crazy game, or in my case, a playoff run that really puts the sport in your blood for good.
I remember following the Tampa Bay Lightning run in 2004. I believe the Canadians lost to them, I think, in the second round that year.
Yeah.
And with St. Louis, Vinny Le Cavalier, guys like Ruslan Fedotenko, Nikolai Abibulin was in net. They had a handful of guys that were just Dave Andreychuk was on that team as well.
He got his cup, at the very end of his career.
Oh, absolutely. Like that run was pretty cool to follow. And like one distinct memory I have is watching game 6 of that Stanley Cup final against the Calgary Flames. And it's going like into double overtime. And not too long after that period started, you see Martin St. Louis put the puck in the net. And like, I remember just like watching it alone and just being so excited. I like ran from my couch and like jumped into like one of the walls in the basement. Like I was like celebrating like I was one of those hockey players on the ice. And like, I'm not a Lightning fan, I'm not a Flames fan. I didn't have any real affinity to those two teams, but I just remember loving that moment so much and just thinking, wow, like this is incredible. So that's like, that I wouldn't say it might not be the moment, but like that's one of my favorite like Stanley Cup playoff moments. And to your point, like when you're a kid, you're not making the most rational decisions or whatever. You tend to just
like what you like.
Super excited.
You just like what you like. Like you don't have to explain it. You're a kid.
Absolutely. One other moment that I have been able to really appreciate with time, even if I wasn't watching it live in the moment, but every time I watch it on YouTube, I feel really choked up. Like I literally pulled it up on YouTube and I got choked up the other day, is Raymond Bourque lifting the Stanley Cup after winning it with Colorado in 2001. Like that is one of the greatest sporting moments ever captured on tape, as far as I'm concerned. It's one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. And I literally got choked up hearing like Gary Thorne describe the whole moment. He is a genius. I love Gary Thorne. I'm a big fan.
What people might forget is Bourque. Look, he probably would have played in his whole career as a Bruin, except obviously he wanted to win his cup. He authorizes a trade the year before to Colorado and they fall short, and he sticks around for one more year and they win it in 2001 finally in a game 7. So, talk about having to push your career to the farthest, stretch it as far as you possibly can before winning. And, I imagine like had Jerome McGinley, for example, won a cup after leaving Calgary, it would have been a similar feeling, right? Like Jerome had such a tremendous career as a Flame. I think all things being equal might have been a career Flame, but, you got towards the end there and saw that probably where the organization was heading, we weren't going to have a chance to win. And that, that can be a tough call for a player. And, there's so many good teams. Like you give any player, you can say you just pick the team you go on. Like you're still not necessarily picking the team that's going to win the cup. So, what a moment that was for Bourque. I'm a sucker for the older player who finally gets his Stanley Cup thing. I love the cup pass line. Usually goes from the captain to that player. Whoever's waited the longest. Pretty special moment there with Joe Sakic and Ray Bourque back in 2001.
Now it's making me think of every team that's left in the Stanley Cup playoffs for that cup pass line. Like who on each team is like most deserving to have the cup first? We don't have to like rehash it like entirely if we don't want to. We have so many other things we want to get to on the CJ show. But like, does Corey Perry get the cup first if Tampa wins?
He probably does because he's won one early in his career, but it was in 2007, right? Like he was. Like every player says that wins it early. He's like, I thought I was going to be there every year. Well, he's also lost the last 2 cups against Tampa. So there's some sort of Marian Hossa-like vibes to his story. And so I could see him being the first for Tampa. The Rangers, I don't know. They don't, I mean, it could be someone like Panarin but they haven't had as many. They don't have like a grizzled veteran guy. Maybe Ryan Reeves, I suppose, could be their pick. I haven't thought of this yet. What's that?
Chris Kreider.
Yeah. I mean, again, those guys are more mid-career guys to me. Like they're not right at the end, whereas Perry, I know he signed next season, but he's truly at the end of his career. So he fits the bill. It might be someone like Mike Smith in Edmonton, if they were to ever come back. I mean, he's right at the end of his career. Colorado, it could be Cogliano. Darren Helm, who won it early in his career at Detroit, but probably someone from their fourth line makes a lot of sense. Jack Johnson on their blue line. They do have a few.
Eric Johnson.
I was thinking Jack Johnson as well on their team. I think, Ryan Murray, like they have older players on their roster. So yeah, I mean, look, someone's going to win it. there'll be some emotional moment. I mean, I'm telling you, that's one of my favorite things each year is watching the cup pass. Just what order they go in, what the players are saying to each other. I mean, that's why we watch this whole 2 months. Really, is that's the culmination, the cherry on the top of it all.
That is very true. And we'll talk more about the remaining teams left in the Stanley Cup Final. And I'll get David Bastel's thoughts on who he thinks, what he thinks is the greatest Stanley Cup playoff moment when we get to him for our You Can Bet That segment. Be sure to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. You have to be 19 and over to gamble at Sports Interaction, and please play responsibly. We will have links to responsible gaming strategies in the description of this video. Welcome to You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Before we get into betting and odds and stuff, David, what would you say is your favorite Stanley Cup playoff moment of all time?
Oh, wow. Okay. You know what? That's easy, actually. So this is going to age me a little bit, but it's Gretzky cutting down the left wing boards, firing down the ice, and hammering a shot top corner over Mike Vernon and Glenn Sather, turning around in his baby blue suit, which I've always wanted to own, and kind of saluting the crowd and giving them the, you know what, it's on all these hockey highlights of best of Gretzky. I'm sure you guys know of it too, but like I said, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I have this clear cut image of a kid watching it and going, wow, white Titan too, white red lettering Titan too. Just an awesome memory. What about you guys?
That is awesome. Like we were talking about this like earlier on in the show. So we have all of our different like respective moments. But yeah, like we're mentioning like Raymond, Bourque and other stuff pertaining to the Leafs, of course, like, CJ growing up with the Leafs and all that. So a lot of different moments for us, but since we talked about it a lot, we had to bring it up just to start off here. Okay, let's start with some series prices here with the Avs and the Oilers. We thought it'd be a little bit closer, but the Avs look as if they could sweep Edmonton at this rate. How are people betting with this one?
Right now, guys, it is circling sweep right now. Colorado 4-0 series win is paying a 1.77 tonight in game number 4, a 1.72 to actually win. Series over in 4. That's just like, it doesn't matter what team it is. Series over in 4, a 1.77 as well. All signs are pointing to the Avalanche. What do you say, guys? Does this get pushed back to a game 5? Do we see some Connor magic that forces this? What do you guys think?
Julian, you're not even going to say it. Look, you're not. You're just like, hate.
No, I'm not a hater. I really wanted a good series out of this. It just doesn't look good. David Bastel. I don't know what to tell you. Connor McDavid can only do so much.
I thought we were going to see the Connor magic in game 3, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, instead of 2-1, you're down 3-0, and it's like, and then Kane's out tonight, and yeah, I hope this gets pushed to a 5th game. I just don't like the chances, guys.
I don't know. I'm thinking the Oilers not wanting to see their season end on home ice. I think that there's going to be a push in there. And unfortunately, the flip side of Evander Kane not being in, Nazem Kadri's not in for Colorado, so they're dealing with a loss there. There's still a path for the Edmonton to stretch this out. I see.
Okay, well, maybe some optimistic views. I'm a little bit more pessimistic. That being said, a lot of things could happen regardless of how you bet. But if you are going to bet, you might as well do it with Sports Interaction. David, thanks so much for kicking it with us. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. Let's talk about the Oilers first, specifically Evander Kane, a 1-game suspension for him. He will not be available for the Oilers as they play game 4 tonight against Colorado. Could be the final game of their series. It comes after the hit he put on Nazem Kadri from behind. Kadri's out for the rest of this series. CJ, what were your thoughts when you saw the hit from Evander Kane, and is 1 game enough?
Well, I mean, he also got a major in that game, so there's a penalty called on the ice. 1 game probably isn't enough, truly, but I mean, it's one game in the conference final. So it's not just one game either. He's not missing a Tuesday in October game. He's missing a game with his team's season on the line, and obviously a very important player for Edmonton. So, I mean, let's keep that into consideration. But, given how dangerous the hit was, I thought the player safety video did a nice job of outlining the fact that, one of Kane's arguments, in his telephone hearing was that Kadri had lost balance a little bit before the boards. But, if you see it from the various angles, it's pretty clear he gets thrown in with the force of the cross check or the hit, the boarding, and it's in that dangerous spot of the ice. I mean, if a player gets hit along the boards, he can brace himself, and players do learn how to take checks there to make it safer. But when it's that distance away, there's nothing you can do other than fall into the boards at a high rate of speed. And unfortunately, Kadri suffered a significant injury there. And so, I would have liked to see maybe a bit more, but I don't get into this as much. We could debate every suspension for how many games, 2 versus 3 versus 1. Clearly a bad hit. At least it was called a major on the ice at the time. I think it shifted the momentum away after that early goal by McDavid in game 3. So, there was already repercussions paid in the game. And now Evander Kane has to watch as his teammates try to extend the season and give him a chance to get back in the lineup.
I felt like the one game was the league's way of saying, we are suspending you for the rest of the series, but we can't just come out and say rest of the series because we don't know how many games are actually left in this series.
Well, except, wait a minute. Nazem Kadri got a rest of the series suspension at one point. One of those Boston suspensions. I've never seen it before or since. It might have happened another time and I've forgotten it, but he literally got suspended for the rest of this series at a point where it was unclear if it would go, 5, 6, or 7 games. So there's some precedent there to do that. I would have been fine with that, honestly. I think it was a really dangerous hit. Partly though you're judging the outcome. It's pretty clear that Kadri's, going to be in tough to even return this season, let alone the series. You never say never because the next round is the Stanley Cup Final, and you can be sure if there's absolutely anything they can do to get his hand in a glove and get him where he can grip the stick, that he's going to do what he can to play, but it's going to be tough for him. And so, bad outcome, bad hit. And, I still think it is a stiff penalty though. Missing a game of the conference final. I mean, you spend your whole career trying to get to a conference final, and to say one of those games is really got to burn.
Yeah. And considering that Evander Kane was putting up all those goals for Edmonton, he'll be a big loss. So Edmonton enters game 4 with Connor McDavid, an unhealthy Leon Draisaitl, Darnell Nurse not playing his best series, no Evander Kane available to them. This is a tough challenge for Connor McDavid. I get that, you want to win on your home ice and you don't want to get swept, but this is a tough challenge for anybody, even for the world's best player.
It's a lot to ask. And, this is why it's so damn hard to win the Stanley Cup. This is why grown men cry when they lift that thing, because
yes,
you get this deep into the playoffs, like everybody's injured, right? And it's pretty clear to me, Darnell Nurse is injured. Obviously we know Leon Draisaitl's playing through injury. Look at all 4 teams remaining, Julian. They're all missing or have a significant injury to a significant center. Ryan Strome left the Rangers game on Sunday and doesn't look like he'll be back anytime soon. Braden Point hasn't been playing for Tampa. The Oilers are down Draisaitl essentially, and Kadri's out now for Colorado. I mean, we're talking about big time players for each of the teams remaining that are gone. And, we know in the lineup that there are players that are probably on the training table or getting, whatever treatment they can just to play. I mean, it's so hard to win. And I think that Edmonton, you're just you're getting a taste of that to play this long into the spring. And, I'm not going to say Connor McDavid can't do it. I still think Connor McDavid could win a game on his own. I know it's a ton to ask, and I'm not saying he has to do that, but he could go have a crazy night and get this thing back to Denver. That to me isn't impossible, but one player isn't going to pull you through an entire series at this stage. And so, Edmonton's either going to need to find some magic in net. I think really what we're talking about in this series isn't them not scoring enough. It's them not being able to limit what Colorado's doing offensively with the amount of pucks that have gone in already. And so what are we at 16 goals, I think, for Colorado through 3 games. So, if they can somehow tighten up, somehow slow the Avalanche attack, obviously for Colorado, missing Kadri is not That's not nothing. That's significant given how well him and his line mates had been playing in this playoffs. Lehkonen and Rantanen with Kadri, really an effective line, and really in this series too. So there's a way Edmonton stretches this out, but it's just hard to see a path. You want to see history sometimes. We want to say, oh, it's possible they could win 4 in a row and do something that's never been done before. It really does not look like it's going that way. And at this point, if you're the Oilers, all you're trying to do is win one game, not be swept, and then go from there.
I got to say, though, with Nazem Kadri being out, right? Obviously a big loss. But for a team like the Avs who, they lose Kadri, they lose Sam Girard, Darcy Kemper dealing with like a nagging eye injury since like the first round. And they still are in a position where they're a game away from the final because they have so much depth at every position. This is the team you want to be if you are any of the other general managers sitting at home watching the Stanley Cup playoffs play out. Like, you want to be the Colorado Avalanche. They literally have depth at every single position. And like, even if they go through a final without Kadri, I'm not particularly worried about this team just because we've seen so many other guys, especially in those depth forward roles, step up. Darren Helm, JT Compher, Big Val Nichushkin had a big night the other night for this team. They have players who can do it up and down the lineup. They
do, but there's two things there. Like, if Kadri can't play for the rest of the year, which is a hypothetical at this point,
absolutely,
it's more wear on everybody going forward. And so, they're probably fine to get through this series with Edmonton, but when they come up against either the Rangers or the Lightning, there could be a price to be paid for that. And that's one thing that's amazed me about Tampa is they found a way to get on without Braden Point. I mean, it's just a different team when Braden Point's on the lineup. Like, having him as your second line center is a gift. And if you look at what he's contributed to their 2 cups the last 2 years, I mean, he's been a huge difference maker for them, and they've found a way to play on. It's possible, but it's really hard. And you're right. Colorado's probably the team everyone would most like to emulate, because I don't think Tampa's as deep of outfit. They lost a number of forwards last year. I know they've done what they can to replace them, but I don't think that they boast the same depth they did, in their 2 cup years. And then, the Rangers are on their way up. I don't see another team as deep as Colorado, but that doesn't guarantee victory. It does give them probably a bit more confidence, and certainly gives Jared Bednar more options when he's dealing with the kind of injury and absence he has with Nazem Kadri. But this is still not going to be an easy run without him. You can patch a hole, but your second line is really important, I think, when you're down to this few teams. And clearly Colorado's second line's worse off today than it was as we entered the weekend without Kadri. So
transitioning over to Tampa Bay, New York, the Lightning getting the job done in Game 3. What did you think of their performance?
I thought that game Sunday might change the entire complexion of their playoffs, honestly. I mean, they looked like it was going the wrong way on them. It wasn't just that they lost 2 games to the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. I think they were outplayed in those 2 games. It just, it was easy to start wondering, was that 9-day layoff too much for them? Are they running out of gas? Start filling in. And yet we saw one of the great counter punches you could expect to see. Like they were impressive, especially for the back half of Game 3. Like that, it was an all-out assault in terms of puck possession and the amount of time they spent in the Rangers zone. They needed all of it to get the win. Obviously coming back from 2 goals down, they get a couple power play goals, and then that beautiful winner from Palat with 40-odd seconds left. To me, that was the sign. I was like, okay, these guys could actually go on and win again. Not that I doubted them per se, but you could start asking those questions. I mean, to me, the will was still there with them in that game, because that's pretty much backs against the wall time, down 2-0 in Game 3 in a series. You're already down 2-0, and so now we got a series. I mean, I think that this sets up pretty juicy now moving forward, because the Lightning still don't have a lot of margin for error, but I think they clearly have new life in this round. And Shesterkin, to me, is the most compelling player in the whole thing, because he's been so good. I think he's still outplayed Vasilevsky to this point in the series. And can he keep creating magic? I mean, if you look at the underlying numbers, he basically saves 1 expected goal per game. That is, there's like 1 more goal the other team's supposed to score that he's not allowing every game. And that's obviously a huge difference maker, where goals tend to be, so valuable at this time of year.
That being said, with the way that Tampa was able to provide that counterpunch, the fact that the Rangers, they're the team that managed to win back-to-back games over the Tampa Bay Lightning, like at all. Like that hasn't happened. When's the last time that has actually happened? I'm trying to remember.
2019 when they got swept by Columbus in first round.
That is that's significant from the New York Rangers. Like how much of a surprise was it not to kind of dial it back, but we should dial it back here because we didn't get a chance to talk after game 2. How surprising was it to see that the Rangers ended up being that team? They took that 2-0 series lead. They still have that series lead after game 3.
It was surprising, especially because they earned it. You know, if you watch that game too, like they took it to the Lightning for huge parts of that game. Like it wasn't as though Shesterkin had to make 82 saves for them to win game 2. I mean, I think from a process standpoint, the Rangers were full value for that victory. And so that's where you start to wonder about, you know, what Tampa's outlook is. You know, I think at any point when a team's won twice in a row already, like you're always wondering, like, do they have, can they go deeper into the well still? Like, do they have enough desire still left after they've already been fed? Can they still be hungry? You know what I mean? And I think you saw that in game 3. Now, that's not a prediction for the rest of the series, quite honestly. I don't know what's going to happen here. You know, I think the level of desperation and the way the Lightning attacked for more than half of game 3, I don't know that that's sustainable for any team. That was truly their response given the urgency of the situation. But, you know, the Rangers, I think they got to be feeling good about themselves, not just because it's a 2-1 series lead. As I say, I think across the full value, even as hard of a push as we saw from Tampa in game 3, the Rangers have had more of the play in the series. And so it's, again, sometimes you might luck your way a little bit or you know, have an individual performance that gets you a lead in a series. I think they've earned this lead. And so they got to go finish it off. You know, it's right there for them still. And you know, that's what I mean. I think this clearly the Western Conference Final. There's not a lot of drama in it. I think there's still room for a lot of drama in this series. And everything's pointing me at a 7-game series at this point. It's just clear that Tampa still has the juice, so they're not going to go down easy. But the Rangers can play with them, and they have a goaltender who's offering a pretty strong. You know, this is a pretty strong statement from Shesterkin this playoffs, especially you know from about midway through round 1 against Pittsburgh. And so I don't know what it's going to go down to, but I mean the Rangers got a shot to beat the champs here, and that's a special thing.
Could this not be a potential transfer of power? I mean, the Rangers have goal scoring ability. They can play well defensively. They have, if not the best goalie in the world, 1A, 1B in Igor Shesterkin. The Tampa Bay Lightning, in some ways, there are some resemblances with those two teams. And not to mention the fact that they have been the power over the last 2 seasons heading into this one. I don't know. I have this weird feeling that if the Rangers get the better of the Lightning this year, this could be like a way for us to transition from the Lightning era of dominance to the potential of something really good for the Rangers going forward. Because this could be a team that could be the class of the Eastern Conference. I've said this before, but they could be a really good team in that conference for a long time. They have everything.
Well, and how poetic would it be? Because for me, when Tampa really crossed that threshold and the dominance is when they beat the Rangers in 2015 in the Eastern Conference Final. Now, that was the last version of the Rangers, of course. You know, that team had played in the Cup Final in 2014, and Tampa went on the road and won Game 7 at Madison Square Garden, got to the Stanley Cup Final, and really, since that point in time, has been consistently the best team in the league. That, you know, they've won a couple cups now and had chances to win other ones that they fell just short. So, you know, it would be sort of the cycle of life kind of feeling. You know, it's hard to predict with any certainty, though. I mean, I love what the Rangers got going on, and it's hard to ignore that many of their best players are still so early in their careers, whether it's Adam Fox. You know, I think you're seeing some of those young forwards come on in this series, and I think we should expect them to get better. You know, Shesterkin himself still on the right side of his 20s, you know, reason to believe he's got several great years ahead of him. And so they have the mix. Keandre Miller, I mean, they just have a lot of good players, frankly, up and down their lineup. And so it could be that takes over this next stretch, but I'm not going to say that for sure. I don't feel it yet. And the other part is, you know, someone told me that kind of knows some of the Lightning guys that they do view this a little bit as they feel that they probably won't have as good a chances in the years moving forward. I don't think they're going to fall right off the map. But, Andre Palat has been sort of one of the really important depth players, upper depth, second line player. He's an unrestricted free agent. I'm not sure if there's going to be money to keep him. Everyone just gets a year older. There's contractual decisions that are going to be pending for guys like Sergachev and Chernak. Cirelli's going to need a new deal. I mean, it's just as things turn over and over and over, I think their depth will continue to be eroded. And so I think the Lightning players know that this might be their last best shot too. And so that's kind of the dynamic, is this team that's fighting to show it's truly there in the Rangers, and then Tampa's got its hands on the ball and doesn't want to let it go just yet. And that's the wrestling match we're going to see play out over the next week or so. Is who can channel their game the most and find a way to hold on. I think it's going to be great theater. I really believe this series is going to, the other one might be well done and dusted for a while, and all the focus will be on whether the Tampa can move on to a third straight cup or the Rangers are ready to break through.
Yeah, at the very least, even if the Colorado-Edmonton series hasn't provided the exact fireworks in the way that we wanted it, at least there is the potential that we'll see a truly great team advance to the Stanley Cup Final as a result, if they get the job done on the Monday. And if that means we have to just enjoy the rest of this Eastern Conference Final, I mean, I'm not going to complain. Tampa and New York, I think they've produced some really great hockey over these last few games. So I have no problem with that. There are worse matchups.
And one way or another, the Stanley Cup Final begins next week, which is crazy to think. Time flies, man.
Yeah. And we get to see like a great matchup between some of the best defensemen in the league. We can see a Cale Makar versus an Adam Fox situation. It could be Cale Makar versus Victor Hedman as well. Like we don't lose if we get those matchups.
No, I don't think there's a bad one in the bunch, honestly. And, what you hope is you get to the final. And obviously we talked about the injuries earlier, that both teams are able to put a reasonable game forward and have a, competitive series. It doesn't always turn out that way, but more often than not of late, we've had pretty competitive cup finals. And, I would think that this one will be that too, but it's just hard to know who's going to be there. Will Braden Point come back if Tampa advances? We've seen him skating. It's a war of attrition, though. You hate to say it, but it's just the truth. I mean, it's the best team sometimes, but there's injuries and all that to play into who manages to win as well.
So we have to make a little bit of a hard turn here, going from talking about what's going on in the Stanley Cup playoffs to a story we haven't been able to touch on a bit yet here on the CJ Show. And that is the Hockey Canada CHL lawsuit, the settlement with the woman who alleges she was sexually assaulted by 8 CHL players. I should mention a trigger warning for this part of the podcast. Please be warned that this content may be disturbing or triggering to those watching or listening right now. If you're consuming our content with children or you're underage yourself, this content might not be appropriate for you. Since the story it was reported. Rick Westhead has been all over this. I know Katie Strang and The Athletic, they have also provided their own reporting. Sheldon Kennedy, former NHLer who went public about suffering sexual abuse at the hands of his junior coach, is calling for details of the lawsuit to be made public. The Canadian government is calling for a financial audit of Hockey Canada. Even the National Hockey League is conducting its own investigation. I know there's not much in terms of our own reporting that we could add to this, but I still think this is something that we have to kind of touch on in some way, because it does affect it. Seeing a lot of people look at the list of that Canadian junior team and thinking, okay, well, which players are out there now? And we're not going to get to any names that may or may not be there, but it's something that has been talked about a lot. And at least for me, it was just a very disturbing story to kind of come across and read and know that these things still happen. Even if it did result in a settlement, it's still a very chilling thing to know that just a very chilling thing to just kind of comprehend.
Well, it hits on two levels, right? There's the one aspect of people trying to figure out who was involved. And unfortunately, because it's from one particular World Junior team, some people that probably had absolutely zero to do with it might have their names kind of drawn into at least the speculation around that. And so, I think that's one aspect. That's the second one is a more systemic, bigger picture question that I think Hockey Canada is going to have to face here in one way or another is what they're doing to prevent this sort of thing. How did they handle it at the time? And I think that's where Sheldon Kennedy's words really rang true to me. I read the story that Rick West had put out with Sheldon's comments, and he's just saying in his world, way back in the day that the reports and things used to be, the idea was to cover them up or to have them be secret. But he said, the only way to learn from it and move forward. I mean, unfortunately, nothing really can be done about what happened in London, 4 years ago. But what can be done is ensuring that proper decisions, safeguards, whatever it may be, are in place to ensure it doesn't happen in future. And so, I don't really know how this is going to turn out, but, just given the amount of interest in the story, the amount of different parties, whether it's, government officials, someone with Sheldon standing within the game, making these sort of, calls, I have to believe, and even the fact the National Hockey League is conducting its own investigation, because presumably among the 8 John Does, one or more of them is currently a player in the NHL. Because there's that level of interest in the story, I have to believe we haven't heard the last of it. I mean, you can reach a settlement. There may or may not be non-disclosure agreements there. Perhaps the victim, for example, won't be able to come out and tell her story more than has already been done so through the court documents. But I do think that there's going to be further repercussions here, both potentially for Hockey Canada as an organization, and then maybe the individuals involved.
That NHL part of it is what intrigues me the most. The fact that there has been calls for details of the investigation to go calls for the lawsuit to go public, all this other fallout, and not just letting the lawsuit stand as it is, that surprised me enough. But the fact that the NHL put out a statement and said that they were looking into this, that surprises me the most. And that is what I am intrigued about the most. Like, what could they possibly, what could happen beyond, what could actually happen from this investigation? What could they find? What could they actually do? Could discipline come? Like, that is the big key in all of this for me. I'm really intrigued at that part.
Yeah. And, I don't know where they're going to end up, but, certainly if it's, any talk of disciplining a player or players, that's spelled out in the collective bargaining agreement, how that process plays out, the NHLPA would be involved. It's sort of quite clear about how that would work. I don't know if we're going to get there or not. It's really tough to say without knowing more of what they're looking at. But the fact that they've, put out a statement and acknowledged publicly that this is, on their radar, I do think is not insignificant in this case. And, it's going to be, there's a lot of pressure, I think, on them to, first of all, do the right thing, to set the right example, and to follow up, not just have that be a press release saying we're doing an investigation and then it goes by the wayside. I think that there will be pressure on them. There'll be questions about it. I would imagine when Gary Bettman speaks to reporters at the start of the Stanley Cup Final, and he typically does his State of the Union type of address, before Game 1 of that series. I think this will be a talking point there. And I don't want to prejudge what the outcome will be, but I would say that they have a range of things that they could do. I mean, they also have relationships with the sport organization in this case. Hockey Canada does enjoy certain privileges as a national sport organization with the government. I mean, I don't know where it ends up with the government officials, but that isn't, it probably doesn't go on a hockey fan's radar as much, but it could have repercussions for an organization. And so, yeah, you get the feeling that this won't just be pushed away. And it's different sort of set of circumstances, obviously, than the Kyle Beach situation earlier in the year that Rick West had reported on. But, I do think we're seeing different treatment of these types of stories now, in large part because of the work Rick does and Katie Strang and others that really operate in with some of these very sensitive, difficult topics and do so in such a professional manner.
Yeah. And also with fans as well, them noticing those stories as well and calling attention online for it as well. We're seeing changes in how hockey fans consume these types of content. I think with how the Kyle Beach thing went down, it has definitely changed how a lot of people view those types of stories going forward. So we're definitely going to try to keep on the story when we can if other details surface. I just felt it was important for us, even though we didn't get to it when it had initially dropped. There have been some updates since the initial reporting from Rick Westhead came. I felt it was important for us just to spend a few more minutes just on this topic today. And even if it was a bit of a hard turn from talking hockey to talking off ice stuff, and then we're going to get to ask CJ now, it was still important for us to have that conversation for a few minutes. And with that, we can get to questions for Chris Johnston. Ask CJ is the segment we do every Monday on this great show. Now, our next partner is a pretty cool product. Let's talk about Athletic Greens. If you're looking to get better gut health, more energy, or a stronger immune system in a really easy, natural way, you've got to check out Athletic Greens. I'm sure you'll all agree that most of us are not huge fans of having to take a bunch of pills or vitamins in the morning. But with Athletic Greens, you can get rid of all those extra vitamin bottles and finally make some room in your cabinet. Athletic Greens is an all-in-one solution that actually tastes good. You'll really enjoy actually getting your daily vitamins in through them. What is this stuff actually? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and even aging. All of the things. Like that's pretty cool. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, daily free, or gluten free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or artificial anything, while still tasting good. It will cost you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. So you don't have to go out to the store, go to Starbucks all the time. Invest in some Athletic Greens. It has over 7,000 5-star reviews, recommended by professional athletes and trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Johnston. athleticgreens.com/Johnston to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. We have one from Scoff_1980 to start. Who got the better return? Joe Sakic when he traded for Matt Duchene, or Kevin Adams when he traded for Jack Eichel?
Ooh, you have to refresh my memory. So Duchene ended up being the pick that became Bowen Byram.
Yeah.
Samuel Girard came from Nashville, I believe, as part of that 3-way deal. Was there anything else that Colorado got in that?
So in that deal, Andrew Hammond was also in that deal. It's Andrew Hammond, 1st-round pick in 2018, 3rd-round pick in 2019, and Shane Bowers for a 1st-round pick in the 2017 draft, also going to Colorado. Nashville setting a 2018 2nd-round pick. Girard is in that deal. Vladislav Kamenev, a 2nd-round choice from 2014. Was Kyle Turris involved in that deal as well?
There was from Ottawa. It was a 3-way trade. Now tell me, so Colorado ended up with 2 1st-round picks?
Yeah, so I believe
I know Bo Byram was one of them, or I believe it was.
Yeah, Bo Byram. So I believe that's the deal where they were supposed to have like 1 1st-round pick from 1 year, or would defer to another year, and Bo and Byram ended up being that first. That's a pretty good trade as far as I'm concerned.
Alex Tuch looked great as a Sabre once he came back from his injury, and obviously Peyton Krebs is at the beginning of his career. I would say Joe Sakic probably did better of those 2, just because Matt Duchene wasn't Jack Eichel, which isn't to knock on Duchene. He's had a great career, and he just had a great season in Nashville that just passed. But I think given that, similar circumstances, because Duchene and Eichel both wanted a trade. I like the Eichel trade too, because, they're in a tough spot there with the whole health situation. It limited maybe the teams that they could trade him to, because not everybody was willing to trade for Eichel and let him go through the surgery that he had. It's a good question. I'll go side with Joe Sakic at the beginning, but that's certainly not to say it's not to criticize Kevin Adams. I think, he did pretty good job under the circumstances on the return there, and maybe history will prove me wrong. I'm high on Bo Byram as a player. I know he's had his own sort of concussion related issues that kept him maybe from reaching his top end yet as a guy, but he's so young still. And then obviously Gerard's been a great pickup for Colorado.
From Optimal Hunter on Discord, do you think if the Leafs have extra cap and roster space at the trade deadline, they bring Spezza back to go for his 1,000th point and another run at the Stanley Cup?
Is this from Steve Dangle? Because Steve texted me a version of this like the minute Spezza retired. Like he already was galaxy braining it. I mean, look, anything's possible. Like there's nothing in the rules that would prevent that. As long as you sign before the trade deadline, you're eligible for the playoffs. And so I suppose it could happen, but I really don't believe it will happen. I think that, it was clear this was a tough decision for Jason Spezza, but I think he's genuinely moving on to the next part of his career. To stay in the kind of shape you have to stay in is difficult. I'm sure he'll remain fit as a human, but it might not be NHL level fit, especially at his age. I don't see him training and skating on his own this whole season. I think instead what he's going to be doing is probably, shadowing the general manager, going on, some scouting type of trips, doing that sort of thing and moving away from his life as a player. So it's a romantic notion. I get where it comes from, but I'd be surprised if that was ever something we saw happen. I really believe that Spezza's career is over and he's moving on to the next phase where he's going to try to win a cup as an executive.
From Insider J Money on Twitter, do you expect any big impacts or have you heard any rumors, difficulties, boycotts about Russians or Belarusian players being drafted and or signed with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine?
I've heard of nothing concrete. I saw there was a report out of Russia, but the Canadians and the Flyers, I believe, having basically an internal decision not to draft Russian or Belarusian players. Both organizations have denied that. So, I haven't heard anything official that way, but look, there's going to be some chill on the draft, I would think. I mean, we've seen this in the past. It wasn't related to a war, but there was a time 10 years ago that most teams shied away, if not outright refused to draft Russian players because they were worried about, them just playing the best years of their career in the KHL and not wanting to come to North America. So I could see it having an impact, but I don't know of any specific sort of organizational decrees that you won't do it. When it comes to signing Russian players, I haven't seen any evidence that is going to happen at this point. I mean, there's a pretty prominent free agent from the KHL named Andrei Kuzmenko. I know a number of NHL teams have inquired about him. He's going through his decision-making process right now. Could see a team like Vancouver potentially signing him. It does seem as though, here's an example of a guy who's available for free, coming off a few good years with SKA St. Petersburg and the first chance NHL teams have to speak to him, he's having those conversations on a number of levels. So, it doesn't seem as though it's really been something the NHL has wanted to go towards. I mean, the other sports have taken far stronger stances on this, right? Whether it's allowing athletes into Wimbledon that are Russian. We saw some impacts on the F1 circuit. World Cup qualifying in soccer, all this stuff has seen outright bans. Internationally in hockey, obviously the World Hockey Championship was just played without a Russian team being represented. I know the World Juniors will be the same this summer, World Under 18s. But the NHL hasn't gone down that road, and I really don't get the sense, quite honestly, that any teams individually have taken that stance.
For this next one, it's a trade proposal, just because it's fun. Mark Scheifele for William Nylander, and they have similar salaries. Mark Scheifele at 6.15, William Nylander at 6.9. Well, essentially, it's the core of a deal. I guess you can add extra parts, but I guess the big deal would be Mark Scheifele for William Nylander. They want your thoughts.
If you're Winnipeg, it might be tough. And William Nylander potentially could be a center, but he really hasn't done it too much in his career. It's only ever been under the circumstances where the Leafs have injuries and they're sort of forced to have a stopgap. So I would think that would be an aspect of the trade that would have to be considered, as if it would leave the Jets too short at center. I don't think it's a crazy notion as an idea, given that they have similar, I think they both have this year and next on their contracts. So you're sort of dealing the same asset in the sense that it's not like one of them's controlled for 5 years and the other has an expiring deal. I don't believe, though, that the Leafs are going to trade William Nylander. I should just say that outright. As much as all the trade machines online are full of potential William Nylander deals, I don't think that that's really the focus of Kyle Dubas. But, that one it's not completely crazy. Also, doesn't sound like the Jets are that inclined to move Scheifele at this point in time, too. So, not crazy, but I just don't see that one gaining much traction either.
Okay. That last one, by the way, was from SMW_Thunder. This next one is from Evan Scrimshaw. It's not quite an Ask CJ, more of an Ask JM, but I need the definitive ranking of 5 best Montreal bars for draft weekend. That is a tough question.
I also need that ranking, JM, so go on.
My first thought was Hurley's has to be on that list, because a lot of if you're that inclined, a lot of the scribes are going to be at Hurley's. McLean's is my go-to for just about everything. So that's on Peel. So like if you're going to try to watch the draft, if you are not able to get into the Bell Center, might as well go to McLean's and watch it there. Yield Orchard is also really good on De La Montagne. McKibben's on Crescent is also really good. Whatever bar the SDPN will be at, because it looks as if the SDPN is going to post up. You know what's crazy? Ziggy's is really popular. I've never been to Ziggy's. I've never been to Ziggy's, but like I feel like that's
been
like
a good hockey bar over the years. I've seen many hockey related person in that bar. And I'm going back more 10 years time, but yeah, that used to be a bit of a spot.
Yeah, like I think that's what it is. It's like a generational thing. Like, if you're like an older person, I guess, like you're frequenting Ziggy's, but like people around like after I cover a game or after I'm at Bell Center for whatever reason, none of my homies are like, okay, let's go to Ziggy's. You know what I'm saying? Like I would go. I'd nothing against them. I just haven't been.
Let's be clear. I'm not saying it's a cool place. It's just it's got like hockey undertones to it. It's like you're likely to see like a GM in there or coach or something from another team.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody. I just haven't been to Ziggy's. But if you look for other spots, I guess Moose Bar is also really good on St. Catherine. The big trending, Taverne 1909 is like directly under the Bell Center. So if you want to get even closer, that's a good idea.
What about that stretch near Joe Beef? Like I can't remember what that little area is called. Griffintown?
So you're talking about so Griffintown is further out. So you're talking about St. Henry or Low Burgundy, as some people call it. So Joe Beef is there. Burgundy Lion is there. You know what's crazy about Burgundy Lion? Burgundy Lion, I consider it a sports bar. I've never watched hockey in that bar. I almost exclusively consider it a soccer bar because the owner there is a big soccer fan. And like every time I've gone there, I'm watching like Premier League like upstairs.
I like that little stretch of the city though. Like if I have an off night in Montreal, I like to go eat somewhere around there and
oh yeah,
it's a good spot.
Absolutely. Brutopia is also another spot downtown that could also work. I know I'm mentioning more than 5, but there's a pretty good contingent of bars, I think.
You know what? I was in Montreal in December and Arpin Basu took me to a good spot in NDG. So we got to hit up Arpin too. I can't remember the name of the bar, but we had a good time there.
Oh yeah, NDG. Probably on Monkland. If he's taking you somewhere in NDG, it's probably on Monkland because that's the stretch where you go. Montreal, man, a lot of
put it this way. It was a bar where everyone knew his name, so I think he's been there once or twice.
It's probably, if knowing him, it's probably the Yield Orchard in NDG. It's probably that one. That's my guess. I could always double check, but that's like the bar on Monkland as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, a lot of good bars in the city, but if you want to venture out and go to NDG, Verdun, Griffintown. I mean, Griffintown's technically downtown, but you get what I mean. You have some good spots, some great spots. So hopefully that helps, Evan. And hopefully this episode has been a great delight to listen to or watch, however you consume our content. CJ, always a pleasure doing these episodes with you. I believe this is episode 77. Speaking of Raymond.
Our Ray Bourque episode.
Yes, we did.
Or our Frank Vetrano episode or Victor Hedman episode.
Ooh, that is also very true. 2 guys who are doing the battle in the Eastern Conference Final, a series that actually still has some intrigue. Thank you so much to everyone who listened or watch this episode on YouTube. Subscribe to our show if you have not done so already. Subscribe to the SDPN YouTube page. We will be back with a brand new episode on Thursday with stick taps and other great and fun, enthralling stuff. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long, and just do it.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Jillian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.